It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, just a roast chicken, some good wine, and family. My husband, Robert, had insisted on it. He told me to keep it low-key. No drama. Just a nice evening before the chaos of the New Year's Eve party later in the week. I should have known better. I'm 65 years old. I have been married to Robert for 32 years. And for every single one of those years, I have been the outsider. I have been the woman who wasn't quite Charleston enough for his family. I wasn't born into old money. I worked for mine, and that has always bothered them. But I tried. I always tried. I was in the kitchen, checking the roast. It was perfect. Golden brown, smelling of rosemary and lemon. I wiped my hands on my apron and took a breath. I wanted tonight to go well. Robert had been stressed lately, worried about his father's estate trust, and I just wanted to be a source of peace for him. I could hear them in the living room. Robert's brother, Tom, and his wife, Gail. Their voices were loud, booming through my hallway. They always took up so much space. Jane really outdid herself with the decorations. I heard Robert say, he sounded tired. Be nice to her tonight, Tom. We are always nice, Bobby. Gail's voice drifted in. It was that sickly sweet tone she used right before she said something terrible. I loaded the heavy silver tray with the roast and the vegetables. It was heavy, but I'm strong. I've always been strong. I walked out of the kitchen, moving quietly across the rugs in the hallway. I was about to turn the corner into the dining room when I stopped. The voices had changed. They weren't loud anymore. They had dropped to a whisper, and there is nothing more dangerous in a family like this than a whisper. I paused near the open door of the den. They thought I was still in the kitchen. They thought the noise of the oven fan was drowning them out. It's all set for Friday, Tom whispered. He didn't sound like a brother. He sounded like a predator. The documents are printed. We have the timeline. Are you sure she doesn't know? Gail asked. If she suspects anything, she might lawyer up before the party. I stood frozen. The silver tray was digging into my fingers, but I couldn't move. Lawyer up? What were they talking about? Tom laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Jane, please. She's 65 and spends her day gardening. She has no idea what's happening with the accounts. She trusts Robert blindly, and Robert is too weak to check the ledgers. My heart hammered against my ribs. Wait until the toast on New Year's Eve. Tom continued, his voice thick with excitement. Everyone will be there. The lawyers, the board members, Dad. We bring out the projection. We show the losses. We reveal that Jane has been managing Robert's personal investments and lost the money due to, let's call it, cognitive decline. I felt the blood drain from my face. Cognitive decline? I was sharper than anyone in that room. I managed our household finances down to the penny. Once we reveal she lost the investment money, Tom said, Dad will have no choice. The morality clause in the trust is clear. If the spouse is incompetent, the control shifts. Dad's trust won't go to Robert. It'll come to us. The room seemed to tilt sideways. This wasn't just gossip. This wasn't just them making fun of my dress or my cooking. This was a heist. They were planning to frame me. They were going to stand up in front of the entire town of Charleston at the biggest party of the year and paint me as a senile, incompetent old woman who had squandered her husband's fortune. And they were doing it to steal Robert's inheritance. And Robert, Gail asked, what if he defends her? He won't. Tom scoffed. He's terrified of being cut off. He'll sit there and take it. He'll let Jane take the fall to save his own skin. That was the part that almost made me drop the tray. I gripped the handles so hard my knuckles turned white. The smell of the rosemary suddenly made me nauseous. My own husband. They were banking on my husband being a coward. I had a choice in that second. I could drop the tray. I could scream. I could run in there and call them liars and thieves. I could throw them out of my house. But then I thought about what Tom said. The documents are printed. If I screamed now, they would hide the evidence. They would gaslight me. They would tell Robert the first was being hysterical, proving their point that I was losing my mind. If I reacted emotionally, I would lose. I took a deep breath. I forced my heart to slow down. I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a woman who had handled worse things than Tom and Gail. They wanted to play a game. Fine. I would play. I adjusted the smile on my face. It wasn't a warm smile anymore. It was a shield. I walked into the dining room, the heavy tray steady in my hands. "Dinner is served," I said, my voice bright and even. Tom jumped. Gail looked at me with wide eyes, searching my face for any sign that I had heard. "Oh, Jane," Gail said, recovering quickly. "We were just saying how quiet you were in the kitchen. Just focusing on the food." I lied. I set the roast down in front of Robert. I looked at my husband. He didn't look up at me. He was staring at his wine glass, looking anxious. Tom was right. He knew, or he suspected, and he wasn't going to do a thing to stop it. I sat down at the head of the table. I unfolded my napkin. "So," I said, looking directly at Tom, "are we all excited for the New Year's party? I hear there's going to be a big announcement." I watched Tom choke on his water. I took a sip of my wine. It tasted bitter, but I swallowed it anyway. I had 48 hours until New Year's Eve. 48 hours to find these documents they were talking about. 48 hours to save my reputation, my financial future, and my dignity. They thought they were hunting a confused old lady. They were about to find out they had stepped into a cage with a lioness. I picked up my fork. "Eat up," I told them. "You're going to need your strength." Dinner finally ended. It took every ounce of willpower I had to serve the coffee and smile as Gail talked about her new tennis bracelet. I watched them leave, Tom clapping Robert on the back a little too hard, whispering something that made my husband look down at his shoes. When the front door finally clicked shut, the silence that filled the house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. I went through the motions of the evening. I loaded the dishwasher. I wiped the counters. I went upstairs and washed my face. I lay down next to Robert, who fell asleep almost instantly. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above us. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. My husband was snoring softly beside me. It was a sound that used to comfort me, a sign that he was safe and home. Tonight, it made my stomach turn. How could he sleep? How could he drift off so easily, knowing what his brother was planning to do to me in 48 hours? "Wait until the toast," Tom had said. I looked at the digital clock. 1:15 a.m. I couldn't just lie there. If I waited until the party to react, I would be walking into an ambush blind. I needed to know exactly what they had on me. I needed to see the weapon before they fired it. I slid out of bed. The floorboards were cold under my bare feet. I didn't put on my slippers. I didn't want to make a sound. I grabbed my reading glasses from the nightstand and my cell phone. I crept out into the hallway. The house was dark, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the sheer curtains. I knew every creak of this house. I knew to step over the loose board on the third step. I knew the handle to the study stuck if you didn't lift it slightly. I made my way down to Robert's home office. This was usually his domain. He liked to play the part of the busy patriarch, sitting behind his mahogany desk, shuffling papers. But the truth was, I handled the household accounts. I paid the bills. I managed our personal savings. Robert just liked the appearance of control. I opened the door and slipped inside, closing it softly behind me. I didn't turn on the overhead light. I couldn't risk waking Robert. Instead, I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam low. The desk was a mess. Papers everywhere. Robert was disorganized when he was stressed. I started sifting through the piles. Utility bills, golf club newsletters, an invitation to the charity gala. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then I saw it. It wasn't on the desk. It was on the small leather armchair in the corner where Tom had been sitting earlier that evening before dinner. He must have left it there by mistake. Or maybe he was just so arrogant, he didn't think I'd ever look. It was a thick manila folder. No label. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I sat in Robert's desk chair and opened it. The first page wasn't a financial document. It was a script. Draft, NY Toast, was scrawled at the top in Tom's handwriting. I began to read. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just a toast. It was a character assassination. We all love Jane, the script read, but we have to be honest about the toll age takes. We've noticed the slips, the confusion, and sadly, the financial mistakes that have cost the family dearly. I felt sick. Confusion? I did the New York Times crossword in pen every Sunday. I flipped the page, and there it was, the proof. It was a fabricated ledger. It looked official. It had the bank logos, the letterhead, everything. It listed our primary investment account, the one holding the bulk of our retirement savings and the funds from Robert's father's trust. According to this paper, the account was empty. There were rows of red ink. Failed tech investment, minus $50,000. High-risk venture loss, minus $100,000. I stared at the numbers. They claimed I had gambled away nearly $250,000 in the last 6 months. If I didn't handle the money myself, I might have believed it. It looked that real, but I knew the truth. I pulled up the calculator app on my phone, my mind racing. I knew exactly where that money was. I hadn't lost it. I had moved it. Back in June, I saw the market getting shaky, so I transferred those funds out of the volatile stock market and into a boring, safe, high-yield municipal bond account. The money wasn't gone. It was sitting safe and sound, earning a steady 4% interest. Tom didn't know that. Tom only saw that the old account was empty. He assumed I'd panicked and sold at a loss, or that I'd spent it. He didn't bother to check where the transfer went because he wanted to believe the worst. But then a colder realization hit me. Tom didn't have access to these accounts. Robert did. Robert received the statements. Robert signed the tax forms. Robert knew. He had to know that the money was safe. So why was this folder sitting in his office? Why was he letting his brother write a speech about my financial incompetence? I looked closer at the fake ledger. At the bottom, there was a note scribbled in the margin, again in Tom's handwriting. Bob, once Dad signs the competency waiver, the trust transfers to me. I'll cover your gambling debt from the first disbursement. The air left my lungs. I reread it. Gambling debt. The puzzle pieces slammed together. It wasn't just that Tom was greedy. It was that Robert was in trouble. My husband, the man who insisted on a low-key dinner, the man who had been so stressed lately, he owed money. He owed a lot of money. And his brother Tom had offered him a way out. The plan was simple. Throw Jane under the bus. Claim she's senile. Get control of the family trust. Tom takes the helm, pays off Robert's debt, and they split the rest. I wasn't just the target. I was the scapegoat. My husband wasn't just a coward. He was a co-conspirator. I felt tears prick my eyes, hot and angry. I wanted to cry. I wanted to go upstairs and shake him awake and scream in his face. I wanted to ask him how he could sell me out after 32 years of marriage for a gambling debt. But I stopped myself. Crying wouldn't save me. Screaming wouldn't save me. If I woke him up now, he would deny it. He would destroy this folder. He would warn Tom. They would come up with a new plan, something I couldn't disprove. I needed to be smarter than them. I wiped my eyes. I held my phone steady. Click. I took a photo of the speech. Click. I took a photo of the fake ledger. Click. I took a photo of the note in the margin about the gambling debt. I made sure the photos were clear. I uploaded them immediately to my cloud storage, then emailed them to a secret account I used for my garden club. I closed the folder exactly as I had found it. I placed it back on the armchair, adjusting the angle so it looked untouched. I stood up. My legs felt steadier now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I had the weapon. I had the proof of their conspiracy. But I needed one more thing. I needed to give Robert one last chance. I needed to look him in the eye and see if there was any part of the man I married left inside him, or if he was completely gone. I walked back upstairs, clutching my phone like a lifeline. I slipped back into bed next to the man who was planning to destroy me. He stirred in his sleep, mumbling something incoherent. "Good night, Robert," I whispered into the darkness. He didn't answer. Tomorrow, I would give him a chance to confess. And if he didn't, well, the New Year's party was going to be a lot more explosive than they planned. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I lay there, rigid, listening to Robert breathe. Every inhale, every exhale sounded like a lie. When the sun finally came up over Charleston, painting the room in soft pinks and oranges, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. For 32 years, I thought I knew the man sleeping beside me. I thought we were partners. I thought that even if we had our differences, he would always protect me. But the photos on my phone told a different story. They told me that my husband was drowning in debt and was willing to use me as a life raft, even if it meant destroying my reputation to do it. I got up before him. I needed the armor of my morning routine. I showered, dressed in my crisp linen trousers and a fresh blouse, and went down to the kitchen. I made coffee. I set the table. I did everything exactly as I always did. When Robert finally came down, he looked terrible. His skin was gray, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Guilt does that to a man. Or maybe it was just fear. He poured himself a cup of coffee and didn't look at me. "Morning," he mumbled, reaching for the newspaper. I watched him over the rim of my mug. This was it. This was his chance. I had decided in the dark hours of the early morning that I would give him one opportunity to be the man I thought I married. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't throw the photos of the fake ledger in his face. I would give him an opening, a safe exit ramp. All he had to do was take it. "Robert," I said softly. He flinched, just a tiny movement, but I saw it. He didn't look up from the paper. "I've been thinking about Friday," I said, "about the New Year's party." He turned a page, snapping the paper a little too loudly. "What about it?" "I have a bad feeling, Robert," I said, keeping my voice steady. I feel like Tom is up to something. The way he and Gail were acting last night. The way they were whispering. It didn't feel right." Robert finally looked at me, but his eyes weren't kind. They were guarded. "You're reading into things, Jane. Tom is just Tom. He's always loud. He's always planning something." It felt different this time. I pressed. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the granite island. "I'm worried, Robert. I'm really worried. Maybe we shouldn't go. We could just stay here, have a quiet night. Just you and me." I held my breath. I was offering him a lifeline. If we didn't go to the party, Tom couldn't do his speech. If we didn't go, the plan would fall apart. Robert could save me right now, by simply saying yes. Robert put the coffee cup down. The ceramic hit the saucer with a sharp clink. He looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It was a mix of annoyance and pity, like I was a child who was afraid of a thunderstorm. "We can't skip the party, Jane," he said, his voice tight. "You know that. Dad is going to be there. The lawyers are going to be there. It's a big night for the family." "Is it a big night for the family or for Tom?" I asked. Robert's face hardened. "Stop it. You're being paranoid. God, why do you always have to make everything so difficult?" The words hit me like a slap. Difficult. I had managed his home, raised our non-existent children because we couldn't have them, nursed his mother when she was dying, and managed our finances perfectly for 3 decades. And I was being difficult for sensing a knife at my back. "I'm not being difficult," I said, my voice dropping lower. "I'm telling you that I feel unsafe. I'm asking you as my husband to listen to me." Robert stood up. He grabbed his keys from the counter. He wouldn't look at me now. He was pacing, agitated. "You're being paranoid, Jane," he snapped louder this time. "Tom is just loud. That's who he is. Don't cause a scene over nothing. You know how important this inheritance is to the family. Dad's trust it's complicated right now. We need to show a united front." He stopped at the door and turned back to me. He looked tired, defeated, and in that moment I saw the truth. He wasn't evil. He was just weak. He was a man who had gambled away money he didn't have, and now he was terrified of his brother and his father. He was terrified of being poor. "Just be a good sport, Jane," he said. "Please. For me. Just smile and get through the night. It'll be fine. Just be a good sport." That was the phrase that did it. That was the moment my marriage ended, not with a bang, but with a request to be a good sport while his family publicly humiliated me. He was asking me to sit there and let them call me senile. He was asking me to let them steal my dignity so he could pay off his bookie or his bad debts. He was sacrificing me to save himself. I looked at him, standing there in his expensive suit, holding his car keys, looking so desperate for me to just agree and make his problem go away. A strange calm settled over me. The heartbreak was there. Yes, it was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. But the confusion was gone. I knew exactly where I stood. I was alone. I stood up. I walked over to the sink and rinsed my mug. I didn't want him to see my face. I didn't want him to see that the woman who loved him was gone, replaced by someone else entirely. "Okay, Robert," I said. I didn't turn around. "You're right. I'm probably just overreacting. I'll be a good sport." I heard him let out a long breath of relief. "Thank you, Jane. I knew I could count on you. I'll see you tonight." I heard the door open and close. I heard his car start in the driveway. I heard him drive away. I stood at the sink, gripping the edge of the counter, staring out at my beautiful garden. The azaleas were blooming. The world looked so normal, but my world had just collapsed. I allowed myself exactly one tear, one hot, angry tear that tracked down my cheek and dripped into the stainless steel sink. Then I wiped my face. "Okay," I whispered to the empty house. "You want a sport? I'll give you a sport." Robert had made his choice. He had chosen his family, his money, and his secrets over me. He thought I was just going to roll over and play the part of the doting, confused wife. He was wrong. I wasn't going to skip the party. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to go. And I wasn't just going to bring a smile. I was going to bring the truth. I walked over to the phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Rachel. She was Robert's niece, my sister-in-law's daughter from her first marriage. The black sheep of the family because she refused to live off the trust fund and became a forensic accountant instead. The family hated her because she was sharp and refused to play their games. She was the only person in that bloodline who had ever shown me respect. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. Aunt Jane. Rachel's voice sounded surprised. Is everything okay? No, Rachel, I said, my voice clear and strong. Everything is very wrong, but I'm about to fix it. I need your help, and I need you to bring your laptop. I have some documents you're going to find very interesting. I met Rachel an hour later at a small bistro on the edge of town, far away from the country club and the places where Tom and Gail liked to be seen. Rachel was already there when I walked in. She looked so much like her mother, Gail, but without the hardness in her eyes. She was 34, a forensic accountant who spent her days hunting down hidden assets in messy divorces. The family called her a traitor because she worked for a living instead of waiting for a monthly allowance. I called her my best hope. I sat down and didn't waste time with small talk. I placed my phone on the table between us. I need you to look at these, I said, and I need you to tell me if I'm crazy. Rachel picked up the phone. She scrolled through the photos I had taken in Robert's office, the script, the fake ledger, the note about the gambling debt. Her eyebrows shot up. She didn't say a word for a long time. She just kept scrolling, zooming in, and reading. Finally, she set the phone down and let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Aunt Jane, she said, shaking her head. This is sloppy, even for Uncle Tom. It looks real enough to fool a room full of people who've had too much champagne, I said. Maybe, Rachel said, but look at this. She pointed to the screen. He faked the routing numbers. And here, he listed a high-risk tech fund loss on a date when the market was actually closed. He just made these numbers up out of thin air to make the total look scary. She looked at me, her expression turning serious. They're trying to build a case for incompetence, aren't they? They want to trigger the clause in Granddad's trust. Yes, I said. They plan to present this on Friday. They're going to say I lost everything. Rachel leaned back, crossing her arms. Well, that's easy enough to disprove. We just pull the real statements. But Aunt Jane, why go to all this trouble? Why create a fake paper trail unless the real money is actually missing? I reached into my handbag and pulled out a small, secure flash drive. That's exactly what I thought. I said, I manage the household accounts, Rachel. I know where every penny of our personal savings is, but I don't see the trust activity. Robert handles that, or he's supposed to. I handed her the drive. These are Robert's login credentials. I've known them for years. He writes everything down in his address book because he can never remember passwords. I need you to log in and see what's really happening. Rachel opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. I watched her face. I saw the moment she found it. Her eyes widened. She clicked the mouse once, twice, then typed something rapidly. Oh, wow, she whispered. What is it? I asked. Did Robert lose it? Is it the gambling debt? Robert didn't lose it, Rachel said, turning the screen toward me. Look. I leaned in. It was a spreadsheet of withdrawals from the main family trust, the one Tom was supposedly protecting from me. Unauthorized withdrawal. T. Castile. I read aloud. Then another. And another. Tom has been bleeding the trust dry for 2 years, Rachel explained, pointing to the columns. Look at these amounts. 10,000 here, 50,000 there. He's been categorizing them as maintenance fees and consulting retainers for a shell company. I felt a surge of adrenaline. So the money is gone? A lot of it is, Rachel said. But here's the kicker. He's reached the limit of what he can take without a signature from the co-beneficiary. That's Robert. Tom needs Robert to sign off on the next tier of funds. It all clicked into place. The final piece of the puzzle. That's why they need to get rid of me, I realized aloud. As long as I'm managing Robert's personal finances, I'm the gatekeeper. If they declare me incompetent, Tom gets power of attorney over Robert's affairs. He can sign the release for himself. Exactly, Rachel said. They aren't trying to save the inheritance, Aunt Jane. They're trying to loot the vault before anyone realizes it's already half empty. I sat back. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For years, they had made me feel small. They made me feel like the lucky shop girl who married into a golden family. But looking at those numbers, I realized the truth. I was the only competent adult in the entire clan. So, Rachel said, closing the laptop with a snap. What do you want to do? We can take this to a lawyer today. We can shut down the party. I thought about it. I thought about Robert telling me to be a good sport. I thought about Gail's smug smile. I thought about Tom rehearsing his speech. No, I said firmly. If we go to a lawyer now, they'll settle it quietly. Tom will cry, make an excuse, and they'll hush it up to protect the family name. I'll still be the outsider. I looked at Rachel. I want them to say it. Say what? I want them to give the speech. I said, I want Tom to stand up in front of everyone and accuse me of stealing. I want him to commit to the lie. And then you drop the hammer. Rachel finished, a slow grin spreading across her face. I need a folder, I said. A bright red one. Something that everyone in the room can see. Rachel pulled a notepad out of her bag. Okay, we're going to build you the ultimate defense. We're going to print the real bank statements showing your gains. We're going to print the municipal bond certificates showing the money is safe. And right next to them, we're going to print these unauthorized withdrawal logs with Tom's name on them. And the gambling debt note, I added. Don't forget the note. We won't, Rachel promised. We're going to prepare a packet for every single person at the head table. The lawyers, your father-in-law, everyone. We spent the next 2 hours mapping it out. It felt like we were planning a military operation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just Robert's wife. I wasn't just a gardener or a cook. I was a strategist. I looked at the messy table covered in notes and coffee cups. You know, I said, Robert thinks I'm at the salon right now. Rachel laughed. Well, you are getting a makeover, Aunt Jane. You're just fixing your portfolio instead of your hair. I smiled, and this time it was genuine. I'm not just fixing it, Rachel. I'm securing it. I gathered my things. I felt lighter than I had in years. I had the truth. I had an ally, and I had a plan. Get the red folder. Rachel, I said as I stood up. Get the brightest one you can find. I want them to see it coming. Friday night arrived with a cold snap that settled over Charleston, turning the Spanish moss on the live oaks into brittle, gray lace. It was fitting weather for an execution. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror. Usually for these family gatherings, I wore something sensible. Navy blue, beige. Something that allowed me to fade into the wallpaper. So Gail wouldn't make a comment about me trying too hard. Not tonight. Tonight, I wore red. It was a deep crimson silk that I had bought years ago and never worn because Robert said it was a bit much. I put on my diamond earrings, the ones I bought with my own dividend checks, not Robert's money. I put on my lipstick. I looked at the woman in the mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a warning. Robert came out of the bathroom, adjusting his bow tie. He stopped when he saw me. For a second, his jaw actually dropped. Jane, he said, blinking. You look, wow, that dress is very bright. It's a celebration, isn't it? I said, turning to face him. New Year's Eve. A new chapter for the family. Robert tugged at his collar. He looked pale. He knew what was coming. He knew that in a few hours his brother was going to destroy me, and he was still going through with it. Right, he muttered, "A new chapter. Just remember what we talked about. Keep it low-key. Don't let Tom get under your skin." I walked over and patted his cheek. His skin was clammy. "Don't worry, Robert. I'm not going to let Tom get under my skin. I'm perfectly calm." We drove to the family estate in silence. The mansion was lit up like a cruise ship. Valets were running back and forth. The driveway was packed with luxury cars. This wasn't just a party, it was a summit. The entire social circle of Charleston was here. When we walked in, the heat of the room hit me. The smell of expensive perfume, champagne, and roast duck filled the air. A string quartet was playing somewhere in the corner, but you could barely hear it over the roar of conversation. I felt the eyes land on me immediately. The red dress did its job. People turned. I saw Gail across the room, holding a flute of champagne. She narrowed her eyes. She whispered something to Tom, who was standing next to her, looking bloated and self-important in his tuxedo. They expected me to be cowering. They expected the confused, old woman they had written about in their little script. Instead, I smiled. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter and walked straight into the lion's den. I circulated. I laughed. I shook hands with the bank president. I chatted with Robert's father, Big Daddy Castile, who sat in his wheelchair by the fire like a king on a throne. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. He was the one I had to convince. He was the one holding the keys to the trust. "You look spirited tonight, Jane," he croaked, gripping my hand. "I feel clear-headed, Pop," I told him, squeezing his hand back. "Clearer than I have in years." I saw Rachel across the room near the library doors. She was wearing a simple black suit, holding a bright, cherry-red folder against her chest. She gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. The trap was set. Now, I just needed to bait the animal. I spotted Tom and Gail near the raw bar. They were holding court, surrounded by a few cousins who were laughing too hard at Tom's jokes. I walked right up to them. Robert tried to grab my elbow to stop me, but I pulled away. "Tom, Gail," I beamed. "Happy New Year." Tom looked at me with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Jane, you're looking festive. That's a bold color for a woman your age." I thought it was appropriate. I said smoothly, "Read for the ledger, right?" Tom's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Excuse me?" I stepped closer, invading his personal space just enough to make him uncomfortable. I lowered my voice so only he and Gail could hear. "The ledger," I repeated, keeping my tone light and conversational. "I was just reading an article about how the IRS is cracking down on family trusts this year. Something about unauthorized withdrawals and shell companies. It sounds terrifying. I hope you have your finances in order, Tom. I'd hate to see anyone go to prison over a clerical error." The effect was instantaneous. The color drained out of Tom's face. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He gripped his glass so hard I thought the stem might snap. He looked quickly at Gail, then back at me. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. A bead of sweat appeared on his upper lip. "Of course you don't," I said, patting his arm. "Just making conversation. It's going to be a big year, isn't it? For all of us." I lingered for just a second longer, letting him see the intelligence in my eyes. I wanted him to know. I wanted him to wonder if I knew. I wanted him to sweat. If he was smart, he would call off the speech right now. He would realize I was onto him and fold his hand. But I knew Tom. He wasn't smart. He was greedy. And greed makes men blind. I walked away, leaving him staring after me, wiping his forehead with a cocktail napkin. I went back to Robert's side. He was drinking his scotch too fast. What did you say to him? Robert hissed. He looks like he's seen a ghost. I just wished him a prosperous new year. I said. The night wore on. The tension in the room grew thicker. I could feel it tightening around my throat. Every time I looked at Tom, he was whispering frantically to Gail, checking his pocket where I knew the speech was hidden. He was rattled, but he wasn't stopping. He was too deep in debt to stop. At 11:15 p.m., the waiters began passing out fresh glasses of champagne. The room started to quiet down. The string quartet stopped playing. This was it. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, but I kept my face smooth. I looked over at Rachel. She moved slightly away from the wall, the red folder visible in her hand. She was ready. I looked at Robert. He was staring at the floor, refusing to look at anyone. At 11:30 p.m. exactly, Tom walked to the center of the room. He stood in front of the massive fireplace, right next to his father's wheelchair. He looked shaky, but he forced a big, fake smile onto his face. He pulled a spoon out of his pocket and tapped it against his champagne flute. Clink, clink, clink. The sound cut through the room like a knife. The chatter died instantly. All eyes turned to him. Attention, everyone, Tom announced, his voice booming a little too loudly in the sudden silence. If I could have everyone's attention, please. Before the ball drops, I have a few words I need to say about the future of the Castile family legacy. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the speech, the same speech I had read in the dark of my husband's office. He looked directly at me. His eyes were cold, desperate, and cruel. We have some difficult truths to face tonight, he said. I took a breath. I didn't look down. I didn't look away. I locked eyes with him and waited for him to hang himself. Tom cleared his throat. He looked at the index cards in his hand, then out at the room, filled with Charleston's elite. He put on a face of deep, pained sorrow. It was a performance worthy of an award. We are a family that values legacy, Tom began, his voice trembling with fake emotion. And part of protecting that legacy is being honest, even when it hurts. It breaks my heart to say this tonight, but we have a crisis in the Castile family. The room was deadly silent. You could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. My brother Robert has been too kind to say anything, Tom continued, gesturing vaguely toward my husband. But we have recently discovered that due to Jane's rapid cognitive decline and some very confusing decision-making, the family's personal funds are gone. A gasp went through the room. I saw people exchange horrified looks. They were looking at me with pity, with embarrassment. She has made some poor investments, Tom said, shaking his head. Reckless ones. The retirement accounts have been drained. We are looking at a total loss. He paused for effect. He looked at his father, who was sitting stone-faced in his wheelchair. Dad, Tom said, his voice dropping to a whisper, for Robert's sake, and for the sake of the trust, I am asking you to invoke the competency clause. We need to transfer control of the assets to me. Immediately, before anything else is lost. He held up the fake folder. I have the bank records here. It's devastating. I looked at Robert. This was it. The lie was out. The humiliation was complete. Everyone in the room thought I was a senile old woman who had bankrupted her husband. Robert stared at his shoes. He took a long swallow of his drink. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He let the silence hang there, confirming everything Tom had just said. My heart didn't break. It hardened into diamond. Actually, Tom, I said, my voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a bell. I stepped away from Robert. I walked toward the front of the room. I didn't look shaky. I didn't look confused. I walked with the stride of a woman who owns the ground she stands on. Jane, please, Gail hissed from the side. Don't make this worse. Sit down. I think I'll stand, I said calmly. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I nodded to Rachel, who was standing near the large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace mantel, the one usually used for slideshows of family vacations. Rachel tapped a button on her tablet. The screen flickered to life. You mentioned records, Tom, I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes on him. I think that's an excellent idea. Transparency is so important. Jane stopped. Tom snapped, losing his fake sympathy. This is exactly what I'm talking about. She's acting out. Rachel, if you please, I said. On the massive screen behind Tom, a document appeared. It was crisp clear and projected in high definition. This is the bank statement from this morning. I announced. As you can see, the funds aren't missing. I moved them to a municipal bond account 6 months ago. And contrary to Tom's claim of a total loss, the portfolio has actually grown by 15%. The room erupted in murmurs. I pointed to the bottom line on the screen. It was highlighted in bright green. That is a profit of nearly $40,000 this quarter. I said, does that look like cognitive decline to you? Tom's face went from pale to purple. This is a trick. That's a fake document. Is it? I asked. It's pulled directly from the bank's portal. But while we are looking at numbers, Tom, let's look at why you were so desperate to get control of the trust tonight. I nodded to Rachel again. The screen changed. This time, the document wasn't a bank statement. It was a log of withdrawals from the main family trust, the one Tom was supposed to be managing. These are the transaction logs from the last 2 years, I said. My voice was cold now. You'll notice a recurring transfer of $5,000, sometimes $10,000, to a company called Castile Consulting. I stepped closer to Tom. He was backing away, bumping into the fireplace hearth. I looked up Castile Consulting this morning. I told the room. It's a shell company registered to a P.O. box in your name, Tom. And the funds? They weren't used for consulting. They were used to pay off gambling debts at the Riverboat Casino. The gasp this time was louder. It was a roar of shock. That's a lie. Tom screamed. She's lying. Dad, she's crazy. And this, I continued, ignoring him, is a note I found in Robert's office last night. In your handwriting. The screen changed one last time. It showed the photo I had taken of the margin note. Bob, once Dad signs the competency waiver, the trust transfers to me. I'll cover your gambling debt from the first disbursement. The room went deadly still. I turned to Robert. He was pale, shaking, looking like he might vomit. You were going to let them destroy me, I said to him, in front of everyone. You were going to let them call me stupid and incompetent just so your brother could use the family money to fix your mistakes. I turned back to the crowd. I am not senile, I said, smoothing the front of my red dress. I am the only person in this family who knows how to count. Dad, Tom yelled, looking at his father. Do something. She's humiliating us. Big Daddy Castile wheeled his chair forward. The motor whirred in the silence. He stopped right in front of Tom. He looked at the screen, at the undeniable proof of the theft. Then he looked at his son. She's not humiliating us, Thomas, the old man rasped. His voice was weak, but his anger was terrifying. You did that yourself. He looked at me. For the first time in 30 years, there was no judgment in his eyes. Only respect. Jane, he said, print those records. I want them on my desk tomorrow morning. And call the lawyers. We are making changes to the will. No. Gail shrieked. You can't trust her. She's the outsider. She's the only one who isn't a thief. Big Daddy roared. The party was over. The music had stopped. The waiters were staring. I stood there in the center of the room, the red folder in Rachel's hand like a victory flag. Tom was slumped against the mantel, defeated. Gail was sobbing. Robert was hiding his face in his hands. I had walked in as a victim. I was walking out as the matriarch. I looked at Tom one last time. "Happy New Year, Tom," I said. "I believe the IRS opens at 8 a.m. on Tuesday." The silence that followed my announcement was the loudest sound I have ever heard. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the spell broke. The room dissolved into chaos. Guests were whispering behind their hands, rushing to finish their drinks and find their coats. Nobody wanted to be caught in the middle of a family implosion. The valet stand outside must have been a nightmare, but inside, the air was thick with the smell of ruin. Big Daddy Castile didn't look at his son Tom. He simply turned his wheelchair around and signaled to his personal nurse. "Get the car," he said, his voice raspy but firm. "And call the firm. I want the trust frozen by morning." Tom tried to run after him. "Dad, wait. It's a misunderstanding. I can explain the withdrawals." "Don't," the old man said, not even turning his head. "You've explained enough." Gail was weeping near the shrimp cocktail tower, her mascara running down her face, looking at the other socialites who were actively avoiding her gaze. They were social pariahs now. In Charleston, you can be mean, but you cannot be broke, and you certainly cannot be caught stealing from your own father. I stood by the fireplace, watching them leave. My heart was pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would feel a rush of joy at seeing Tom and Gail reduced to nothing. But I didn't feel joy. I felt exhausted. I felt a deep, heavy sadness for the years I had wasted trying to impress these people. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around. It was Robert. He was sweating, his face flushed, but he was smiling. It was a wide, frantic, relieved smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked like a man who had just survived a firing squad because the gun jammed. "My God, Jane," he breathed out, laughing nervously. You were brilliant. Absolutely brilliant." He tried to pull me into a hug, but I stood stiff as a board. He didn't seem to notice. He kept patting my back, talking fast. "I had no idea," he stammered, pulling back to look at me. "I swear, Jane, I had no idea Tom was stealing from the trust. I thought he was just being, Tom. But embezzlement, a shell company, you saved us. You literally saved us." He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. "Did you see Dad's face? He's finally done with Tom. This changes everything. With Tom out of the way, the trust management will fall to me. Well, to us. We're going to be set, Jane. We can finally fix the roof. We can take that trip to Italy you always wanted." He was giddy. He was planning our vacation. He was acting like we were a team again, like we were partners who had just won a great victory together. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with for 32 years. "Robert," I said quietly. I know, he rushed on, ignoring the tone of my voice. "I should have stood up to him sooner. But you handled it perfectly. That red folder. Where did you even get that? And Rachel, who knew she was so sharp? We need to take her to dinner." He reached for my hand again. "Come on, let's get our coats. Let's go home. We have a lot to celebrate." "No," I said. I pulled my hand away. Robert stopped. The smile faltered on his face. What do you mean, no? The party is over, Jane. We won." "You didn't win anything, Robert," I said. The room was nearly empty now. The waiters were clearing the tables, pretending not to listen, but I knew they heard every word. I didn't care. "I won," I told him. "I saved my reputation. I saved my money. But we didn't win." "Jane, don't be like that," Robert said, his voice taking on that familiar, pleading whine. "I know you're upset that I didn't defend you earlier. And I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry, but I was in a tough spot. Tom had that debt over my head. I was scared. I know you were scared. I said, I know you were in debt. I saw the note, remember? Exactly, Robert said, looking relieved that I understood. So you get it. I had to play along. I didn't want to hurt you, Jane. I needed to buy time. I looked at him, really looked at him. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about money. He thought this was about a gambling debt or a brother's bullying. You told me to be a good sport, I said. Robert blinked. What? Yesterday morning, I said, my voice trembling slightly, in the kitchen. When I told you, I was scared. When I told you I felt like Tom was planning to hurt me. You didn't tell me you were in trouble. You didn't ask for my help. You told me to be a good sport. Jane, it was just a figure of speech. He protested. No, it wasn't, I said. It was a request. You were asking me to sit in a chair and let your family call me stupid. You were asking me to let them destroy my dignity in front of the entire town, just so you wouldn't have to face your own mistakes. But I didn't know they were going to go that far. Robert argued. I thought it would just be a few jokes. You knew, I said. You saw the speech in your office. You knew they were going to call me cognitively declined. You knew they were going to take away my agency. And you were going to let it happen. I looked down at my left hand. The diamond on my finger caught the light of the chandelier. It was a beautiful ring. I had worn it for more than half my life. It felt like a part of my body. But looking at it now, it felt heavy. It felt like a shackle. I saved the money, Robert. I said, I saved the inheritance. You're going to be rich. You can pay off your gambling debt. You can fix the roof. You can go to Italy. I reached for my ring finger. Robert's eyes widened. Jane, what are you doing? But I'm not saving us, I said. I slid the ring off. It left a pale white band on my finger where the skin hadn't seen the sun in 32 years. My hand felt strangely light. Naked, I took Robert's hand, the hand I had held at funerals, at weddings, in hospital waiting rooms. I placed the ring in his palm and closed his fingers over it. Jane, stop, he whispered, panic finally setting in. You can't do this. Not tonight. Everyone is watching. We're a team. You just proved that. You fought for us. I fought for me. I corrected him. Because you wouldn't. But where will you go? He asked, looking around the empty ballroom like a lost child. You can't just leave. You're my wife. I was your wife, I said. Tonight, I was your scapegoat. And tomorrow I'm just Jane. I stepped back. The distance between us was only a few feet, but it felt like an ocean. I love you, Robert, I said, and I meant it, but I love myself enough to know that I cannot stay with a man who would watch me burn just to keep himself warm. Jane, please, he called out, his voice cracking. Don't do this. Think about what people will say. I smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. Let them talk, I said. I have nothing left to hide. I turned around and walked toward the heavy oak doors of the mansion. I didn't look back at the crystal chandeliers. I didn't look back at the empty champagne glasses. And I didn't look back at the man standing alone by the fireplace, holding a diamond ring he no longer deserved. I pushed the doors open and walked out into the cold, crisp air of the new year. 3 months have passed since the night of the red folder. I am sitting on the balcony of my new condo in downtown Charleston. It is a Tuesday morning, and the sun is pouring in off the Cooper River, turning the water a brilliant, sparkling blue. In the big house with Robert, the curtains were always heavy velvet. They were meant to keep the sun out, to protect the antique furniture and the old rugs. Here, everything is light. My walls are painted a soft cream. My furniture is modern and comfortable. I have a white linen sofa, that Gail would have hated. And I absolutely love it. I took a sip of my iced tea and checked the time on my iPad. I had a lunch date in an hour. But first, I had some work to do. I opened my investment portal. I didn't need Robert to explain the numbers to me anymore. I didn't need to wonder if funds were being siphoned off to pay for secret debts. I managed my own portfolio now. I clicked through the screens. The municipal bonds were performing steady and strong. I had moved a small portion of my savings into a new venture, a startup bakery run by a local woman who reminded me of myself at 30. It was a risk, but it was my risk to take. There is a terrifying freedom in signing your own checks. For the first few weeks after I left the mansion, I woke up in a panic. I wondered if I had made a mistake. I wondered if I was too old to start over. I wondered if I should have just forgiven Robert and gone back to the safety of the known. But then I would remember the look on his face when he told me to be a good sport, and the panic would vanish, replaced by a deep, quiet calm. I am 65 years old. Society tells women my age that we are invisible. It tells us that our story is over, that we should just fade into the background and be grateful for whatever scraps of attention our families give us. But looking out at the bridge, feeling the warm breeze on my face, I realized that society is wrong. My story isn't over. In fact, the first 64 years were just the prologue. The real story, the one where I am the main character, is just beginning. My phone buzzed on the glass table. It was a text from Robert. Thinking of you, Jane. The house feels very big. Hope you're well. I looked at the message. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt distant, like he was someone I went to high school with a lifetime ago. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I deleted the message and stood up. I had places to be. I met Rachel at a bistro on King Street. She was already there, waving at me from a corner booth. She looked different too. She had quit the firm that overworked her and started her own practice. To the dynamic duo, Rachel said, raising her glass of sweet tea, as I sat down. To the red folder, I corrected her with a smile, clinking my glass against hers. We ordered salads and laughed about everything and nothing. We didn't talk about Tom, who was currently being sued by 3 different creditors. We didn't talk about Gail, who was trying to claw her way back into the social scene. We talked about the future. You know, Aunt Jane, Rachel said, leaning forward, I have a client who needs help organizing her estate. She's a widow, overwhelmed by the paperwork. I told her I knew someone who was a genius with detailed accounts. Are you trying to give me a job? I asked, laughing. I'm trying to give you a consulting fee. Rachel grinned. You're good at this. Better than the professionals. I thought about it. Me, Jane Castile, a consultant. I'll think about it, I said, but I already knew the answer was yes. After lunch, I walked home along the Battery. The tourists were out, taking photos of the grand old houses. I walked past the wrought iron gates and the manicured gardens that used to be my entire world. I used to worry so much about what the people inside those houses thought of me. I used to worry if my dress was right, if my roast was dry, if I was worthy of the name Castile. I walked past them without stopping. I reached my building and took the elevator up to the 4th floor. I walked into my bright, sunny living room. It was quiet, but it wasn't the lonely silence of the mansion. It was a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a space that belongs entirely to you. I walked over to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at the woman staring back. She had wrinkles. She had gray hair, but her eyes were bright. Her shoulders were back. She didn't look like a victim. She didn't look like a good sport. She looked free. I lost a lot that night at the New Year's party. I lost a marriage. I lost a lifestyle. I lost the illusion of safety. But as I stood there, listening to the hum of the city outside my window, I realized I had gained something far more valuable. I lost a husband that night, but I found the woman I was always meant to be. What city are you listening from? And what time is it there? Write it in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you'd like to help me keep sharing these emotional, thrilling stories every day, please consider supporting the channel. Even a small donation makes a big difference. It truly helps keep the channel alive and allows me to create more content for you. For more life stories like this, you can explore the other videos on my channel and subscribe. On the screen right now, you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click one and start listening right away. With love.